You check your phone 40 times a day, and you don't remember doing it 40 times. That's not a bad habit. That's a brain that has been quietly retrained without your permission. And the scary part is you probably don't even notice it happening anymore because it feels completely normal now. Most people think a dopamine detox is about willpower. Sit in a quiet room, avoid your phone for a weekend, feel proud of yourself, then go right back to 12 hours of scrolling on Monday. That's not a detox. That's a temporary punishment your brain forgets within a week. A real reset isn't about suffering through boredom for a few days so you can post about it. It's about noticing the specific signs your brain is sending you right now, understanding why they're happening, and then rebuilding your reward system on purpose instead of letting an algorithm build it for you by accident. Here's what almost nobody explains properly, and it's the part that changes how you should think about this entire topic. Dopamine itself isn't the villain here. It's one of the systems that drives motivation, learning, and the ability to pursue anything at all. Without it, you wouldn't get out of bed, let alone chase a goal. The actual problem is artificial overload. Your brain evolved expecting rewards to be slow, effortful, and unpredictable in a healthy way. Now it can get novelty in one swipe, validation in one notification, and entertainment in one tap, over and over, thousands of times a day. And a brain exposed to that much stimulation doesn't stay the same. It adapts, quietly, gradually, and almost invisibly, until one day normal life starts to feel strangely dull. Here's something worth knowing before we start. Constant stimulation doesn't just wear down your focus. It quietly raises your baseline restlessness too. When nonstop input disappears, silence itself can start to feel almost threatening instead of peaceful. That's part of why people instinctively reach for their phone the moment an uncomfortable emotion shows up. Not because they're weak, but because distraction has quietly become their main way of regulating how they feel. So today we're covering two things. First, 10 signs your brain is quietly overstimulated and overdue for a reset. Second, a full 30-day plan to actually fix it without disappearing from your own life or pretending you live in 1995. Stay until the end, because the mistake in week 2 is the one that quietly makes almost everyone quit right before things actually start working. Sign 1. You can't sit still without your phone. Waiting for coffee, standing in a line, sitting at a red light, even walking to your car for 30 seconds. If your hand automatically reaches for your phone in every single gap of silence, that's not boredom. That's your brain refusing to tolerate even a few seconds without stimulation. A healthy brain can sit with nothing happening and simply exist in that moment. An overstimulated brain treats stillness like a problem that needs to be solved immediately. Sign 2. Normal tasks suddenly feel unbearably slow. Reading a page feels like it takes forever. A 10-minute video feels long. A conversation that isn't fast-paced and constantly entertaining starts to feel boring. This isn't because those things changed. It's because your baseline for stimulation moved so high that anything below it now feels like nothing is happening at all, even when something genuinely useful is. Sign 3. You feel tired despite doing almost nothing productive. You scroll for 2 hours and somehow feel mentally drained afterward instead of relaxed. That's the difference between being stimulated and being fulfilled. Your brain processed constant novelty without ever settling into anything long enough to feel satisfied, exhausted from input, not from effort, which is why rest doesn't actually feel restful anymore. Sign 4. You know exactly what you should do and still can't make yourself do it. Not laziness, not a character flaw. Your reward threshold has quietly shifted so high that anything requiring patience, from studying to simply starting an email, now feels almost physically uncomfortable to begin. Sign 5. Silence makes you uneasy. Not sad, not anxious exactly, just restless. A quiet room without a video, a podcast, or music playing starts to feel strange, almost too loud in its own way. That discomfort is a signal your nervous system has stopped expecting calm as a normal, safe state to be in. Sign 6. You multitask constantly without even realizing it. Eating while watching something. Working with 3 tabs open just in case. Listening to a podcast while scrolling a different app at the same time. Half attention has quietly become your default, and giving one thing your full attention starts to feel unfamiliar. Sign 7. Your motivation swings wildly depending on how stimulated you already are. Right after a long scrolling session, starting anything meaningful feels almost impossible. But after a few hours away from screens, you suddenly feel capable and clear-headed again. That swing is a sign your motivation is being hijacked by your last dose of stimulation instead of coming from something stable inside you. Sign 8. You reach for your phone during uncomfortable emotions instead of sitting with them for even a moment. Stressed, lonely, bored, anxious. The automatic instinct isn't to process the feeling. It's to escape it instantly. Over time, distraction quietly stops being entertainment and becomes your main emotional regulation strategy, whether you meant for that to happen or not. Sign 9. You finish long stretches of content and remember almost none of it afterward. You scrolled for an hour, watched a dozen videos, and afterward you genuinely struggled to describe what any of them were actually about. That's shallow attention at work. Input without depth, occupation without engagement. Sign 10. You keep replacing one form of stimulation with another and calling it progress. You delete one app and immediately open a different one that does basically the same thing. You quit short videos and suddenly start binging something else instead. If removing the source doesn't actually reduce the craving was never really about that specific app. It was about the stimulation itself. If 3 or more of these sound uncomfortably familiar, your brain isn't broken. It's just been trained by repetition. And the same repetition that built this pattern is exactly how you retrain your way out of it. None of these 10 signs mean something is fundamentally wrong with you. They mean your environment has been shaping you for years, mostly without your permission. Before we get to the plan, let's clear up what a dopamine detox actually isn't. It isn't sitting alone in a dark room for 3 days with no phone and no conversation, pretending suffering equals progress. Almost everyone who tries that version fails within 24 hours, then feels like a failure for something that was never realistic to begin with. It also isn't permanently swearing off your phone or anything fun, like pleasure itself is the enemy. The actual target is narrower. You're not trying to remove reward from your life. You're trying to restore your sensitivity to it. So ordinary things feel rewarding again instead of requiring constant novelty just to register as interesting. Here's the 30-day framework, broken into 4 phases so it actually survives real life instead of collapsing by day 4 like most detox plans do. Week 1 is awareness and lowering the noise. Don't try to eliminate everything at once. Your brain hates sudden extremes, and an all-or-nothing plan almost always ends in an all-or-nothing failure within days. Instead, spend the first few days simply noticing. Notice every time you unlock your phone without a specific reason. Notice every tiny moment of discomfort that sends your hand reaching for a screen before you've even consciously decided to. You're not fixing anything yet. You're just becoming aware of a pattern that's been quietly running on autopilot for years. Then start removing the single biggest source of overstimulation first, which for most people is short-form video, not reduced slightly, removed aggressively for this week, because a handful of 15-second clips does more damage to your attention span than almost anything else you consume in a day. Alongside that, start eating 1 meal a day without a screen, and take 1 short walk without audio playing in your ears. Small changes on purpose. The goal this week isn't perfection. It's proving to yourself that a few minutes of unstimulated time genuinely won't hurt you, and that boredom, uncomfortable as it feels right now, is not actually an emergency. Week 2 is usually where things get uncomfortable, and it's also exactly where most people quietly quit without realizing why. Around this stage, tasks that used to feel manageable suddenly feel more boring than before you started. Cravings for stimulation often get slightly worse here, not better. This confuses people into thinking the reset isn't working. It's actually the opposite. You're finally noticing a dependency that was completely invisible while you were constantly feeding it around the clock. Push through this stage by replacing high stimulation habits with slower, more effortful ones instead. Reading instead of scrolling before bed. A real conversation instead of scrolling through a group chat. cooking instead of ordering while half watching something in the background. These will feel flat and unrewarding at first, and that's expected. You're not choosing them because they're exciting right now. You're choosing them because they slowly retrain what your brain considers a normal, acceptable reward. This is also the week to watch for substitution, because your brain doesn't just go quiet when you remove its favorite source of stimulation. It goes looking for the next closest thing, checking email far more than usual, a sudden pull toward online shopping, reorganizing your phone's home screen out of restlessness, same craving, different outfit. Notice the pattern and redirect back toward one of the slower activities instead of letting it quietly relocate somewhere you weren't watching. Week 3 is where the shift usually becomes genuinely noticeable. Focus gets a little easier to hold on to. Conversations start feeling more engaging again instead of something to get through. Simple tasks stop feeling like they require enormous effort just to begin. This happens because your reward sensitivity is slowly recalibrating back towards something closer to normal. You'll also likely notice something else around this point. That scattered feeling of being pulled in 10 directions at once starts to genuinely fade. This is the week to build in slightly more challenge on top of what you've already built. Extend your screen-free stretches a little further. Add a second daily habit that requires sustained attention, whether that's a longer walk, a full chapter instead of a few scattered pages, or one truly uninterrupted work block. You're not just resting anymore at this stage. You're actively rebuilding capacity you'd lost without noticing, the same way a muscle rebuilds strength once it's finally given consistent, gradual resistance again instead of nothing at all. Something else tends to show up around week 3 worth naming. Time starts to feel slower, in a good way. Conversations feel more real. Ordinary moments stop rushing past in a blur. Constant stimulation compresses how deeply your brain encodes experience, so weeks blur together when you're overloaded. Once attention becomes intentional again, life genuinely starts to feel fuller instead of faster. Week 4 is about identity and permanence, and it's arguably the most important week, even though it looks the least dramatic. This final stretch isn't really about willpower anymore. It's about proving something to yourself. Every time you choose the harder, slower option instead of the instant one, your brain quietly collects evidence that you're someone who can direct your own attention instead of constantly reacting to whatever grabs it first. That evidence matters more than people realize, because a brain that trusts itself behaves completely differently than one that's used to breaking its own promises every single day. In this final week, decide which changes become permanent instead of temporary. Maybe short-form apps stay deleted for good this time. Maybe your phone stays outside the bedroom from now on, not just for 30 days. Maybe one meal a day stays screen-free forever. The specific rule matters less than making at least one of these boundaries genuinely permanent, because a 30-day reset that ends on day 30 and gets replaced by the exact same old habits was never really a reset at all. It was just a pause. There's also a quieter benefit in week 4 worth naming, and it has nothing to do with focus directly. It's self-trust. Every time you told yourself you'd stop after 5 minutes and actually stopped, your brain filed that away as evidence. Repeated self-betrayal quietly convinces you that you can't keep promises to yourself. 30 days of small, consistent follow-through reverses that story, and a version of you that trusts its own word behaves differently in almost every other area of life too. And here's the one mistake that quietly ruins this entire plan for a lot of people, the one I promised you earlier. Replacing one source of stimulation with another and calling it progress. You delete the short video app and suddenly you're deep in hour-long video binges instead. You quit one game and pick up constant podcast listening at every single spare second of the day. Your brain genuinely does not care what the stimulation source is. It just wants stimulation. And if you're not paying close attention, you'll finish 30 days having simply changed the flavor of distraction instead of actually resetting anything underneath it. So throughout this entire process, keep asking yourself one honest question. Am I actually resting my brain right now? Or am I just swapping one form of noise for a slightly different one? That single question alone will save this reset from quietly failing in the background while you think it's working. None of this means removing enjoyment from your life completely. The goal was never to become someone who never relaxes or never watches anything fun again for the rest of their life. The goal is removing the compulsive part specifically, the part where you can't stop, where silence feels genuinely unbearable, where your attention can't hold onto one single thing for more than a few seconds without twitching toward something else. A properly reset brain can still enjoy entertainment fully. It just isn't controlled by it anymore. 30 days from now, your brain can genuinely feel different from how it feels today, reading this sentence. Not because you white-knuckled your way through pure willpower, but because you gave your reward system an actual chance to recalibrate back to something closer to normal. Sustained attention is quietly becoming one of the rarest and most valuable skills a person can have in modern life. Everyone around you is losing theirs in tiny increments they don't even notice happening. Protecting yours, even imperfectly, even with a few bad days mixed in, puts you in a completely different category over time. And you will have bad days during this 30-day stretch. That part is guaranteed. You'll catch yourself an hour deep into something you didn't mean to open. That single slip doesn't erase the progress underneath it. The only version of this that actually fails is the one where one bad afternoon turns into a permanent excuse to abandon the whole thing. Notice the slip. Get curious about what triggered it instead of ashamed of it, and simply return to the plan at the very next opportunity. Not next Monday. If you recognized yourself in 3 or more of those 10 signs, the reset isn't really optional anymore. It's overdue. Start with week 1 today. Not next Monday. Not after this weekend. Not once things calm down. If this video was useful, hit like so more people dealing with this quietly, find it, and subscribe to Mental Craft for more practical, research-backed videos on focus, discipline, and rebuilding a sharper mind. And tell me in the comments, which of those 10 signs hit closest to home for you?